Jesus was not worried about death. He just was not worried about it, right? Because he had the ability to undo it. But the problem for us is that we do fear death. In fact, hurry comes from the fear of death. Think about it again. You're Jesus, and you hear that your friend Lazarus is sick. And let's for a second just hypothesize that you can't actually raise the dead. Well, you are going to rush there as fast as you can because you need to talk to him, because if he dies, you can't talk to him anymore. You can't say, I love you, or I forgive you, or I'm sorry, or whatever it is. But if you don't have the fear of death, if you know the death is not the end, you don't have to hurry. But we still fear death. And we fear it in 1,000 different ways. Let's imagine for a second you're a teenager, and you want to get as many experiences out of your life as possible because you know eventually you're going to get into the real part of your life where you're going to get married and have kids or whatever you're going to do, and you're trying to get as much out of this moment as possible. You're trying to look as cool, have all the successes that you possibly have in school, and you're running around and you're anxious and you're worried about all of it. Why? Well, because you know eventually you're going to graduate, and whatever you've done during those years, it's going to be marked at the end of those years, or you know that you're going to get older, and when you get older, you're not going to have the time or the energy to do these things. You fear death. You fear the progression of life that goes ultimately to death. Or let's say you're in your 30s, and maybe you're in your early 30s, you're trying to get that last bit of travel out of life before you have kids, and so you're either working your butt off to get enough money to go on the trip, or you're trying to plan the trip and trying to figure out how to get out of work in order to do that, and you're hurried, and you're anxious, and you're worried. Why? Because you realize the progression of life leads to a place where you can't do this anymore. Or maybe you're in your 30s and you're working that job and you've gotten into your career now. You've settled down a little bit, but the nose is to the grindstone. You have to put in extra hours. You have to get extra jobs. You have to build your clientele. You have to grow in the community or in the business. Because you know that retirement is eventually going to come, and if you don't put the hard work in these years, you won't have success then. Or you're middle-aged and the kids have moved out of the house and you realize that all the purpose you had in your life that was put into your children is now gone. And what are you going to do with yourself? You realize you're getting close to the end of your life, so, well, let's do all the things I wanted to do before. And you worry and you're anxious. Or maybe you're getting close to retirement and you're worried and anxious that you're going to have enough money to live out your years. Or maybe you're past that age and you're on the home stretch and you have maybe 10 years more on this earth and you're worried and anxious and you're trying to fill your life with everything because you fear death. It's the same problem for all of us. We fear death. We see the clock ticking on our life. And whether we are 6 or 66, we feel it. So all of our hurry comes from a fear of death. But Jesus doesn't fear death. And his unhurry that comes from his lack of fear of death allows him, first of all, to generously listen. Right? He generously listens to Mary and Martha. They both say the same words to him, but he hears different things from them because he takes the time to feel their emotions. You ever had this happen to you? Maybe if you're married, your spouse says something and you hear one thing, but they meant another thing, and it's usually because you're not listening that well. Jesus isn't like that. And then when he generously listens, first of all, he has the time to patiently teach Martha. He doesn't just text her a Bible verse. He takes the time to ask her questions. Do you believe this? Do you understand this? This is what I'm coming to do. And then he reinforces it later. Didn't I tell you that you would see the glory of God? He has the time to feel Mary's emotions with her. He has the time to feel his own emotions at the tomb. And finally, maybe the one that we gloss over when we read the text, he had the time to pray. I don't know about you, but one of the biggest temptations Satan brings against me is you don't have time to pray. And by the way, he usually never tempts me with something terrible, like, you don't have time to pray, you need to go steal your neighbor's car. He usually says something really good, right? Like, you don't have time to pray because you need to clean up the living room. You need to help your wife with the kids. You need to make sure you get started on work early today. But Jesus had time to pray because he didn't fear death. So good for Jesus, eh? But what about us? You don't have to fear death. Because in the same way that Jesus opened Lazarus' tomb so that Lazarus' life would not end there, but would continue, not just on this earth, but would continue eternally, your life also will be forever. Your life is not contained in the 60 or 70 or 80 years you get on this earth. It is contained in eternity. And if the clock is going to stop and there will be no time, why are you rushing? What are you worried about? You don't have to fear death. So slow down. Or another way to think of it is to stop thinking of your life in terms of hours and days and years, but think of your life more in terms of eternity. If I'm going to live forever, how much does this matter? If I'm going to live forever, how much should I care? How much should I invest?